Hannibal Lecter eats people. But he does it with such exquisite taste that we find ourselves rooting for him. What does this disturbing attraction say about us as a society? Why are we so magnetically drawn to monsters who possess impeccable manners and superior intellect? Tonight, we dive deep into the psyche of fiction's most sophisticated predator and uncover the uncomfortable truth about why we worship well-educated monsters. This isn't just about a fictional character. This is about us, about our darkest desires dressed in the finest cultural clothing. In a world where intelligence has become the ultimate currency, where cultural sophistication signals social superiority, Hannibal Lecter represents something far more terrifying than simple brutality. He embodies our secret fantasy of transcending moral limitations through intellectual supremacy. He is the gentleman we might become if we stripped away conscience and embraced our most predatory instincts. But here's the question that should keep you awake at night. What if Hannibal Lecter isn't the aberration we think he is? What if he's actually the logical endpoint of our cultural obsessions? What if every time we admire his wit, his taste, his psychological insights, we're really admiring a mirror reflection of our own capacity for sophisticated cruelty? The story of Hannibal Lecter begins not with cannibalism, but with fascination. From the moment Anthony Hopkins first appeared on screen, delivering psychological insights with surgical precision, audiences found themselves in an impossible position. Here was a character who should repulse us completely, yet possessed qualities our society taught us to revere: brilliant intellect, refined taste, cultural sophistication, and an almost supernatural ability to see through human pretense. This contradiction sits at the heart of modern civilization's greatest moral blindness. We've been conditioned to equate intelligence with virtue, education with goodness, cultural refinement with moral superiority. Hannibal shatters this comfortable illusion by demonstrating how these very qualities can be weaponized against humanity itself. Consider his first scene with Clarice Starling. While confined behind glass and restraints, he demonstrates complete psychological dominance through nothing but words. He dissects her background, her motivations, her deepest insecurities with the precision of a master surgeon. And we watch in horrified admiration. We know he's dangerous, we know he's killed and eaten people, yet part of us envies his ability to read human nature with such devastating accuracy. This is the seduction of the forbidden made manifest. Hannibal offers something our morally constrained lives cannot: the freedom to see through all human pretense, to act on our darkest impulses, to treat other people as objects for our consumption, whether literal or metaphorical. He represents the ultimate liberation from social contracts that bind us to treating others with dignity and respect. But liberation at what cost? Every compliment we pay to Hannibal's intelligence, every moment we admire his psychological insights, we're applauding the weaponization of human knowledge against human welfare. We're celebrating the very corruption of education and culture that should terrify us most. The genius of Thomas Harris's creation lies not in making Hannibal merely smart, but in making him culturally sophisticated in all the ways our society values most. He doesn't just kill people. He transforms murder into high art. He doesn't just eat them. He creates gourmet experiences that would earn Michelin stars. He doesn't just manipulate people. He does so through references to classical music, Renaissance art, and philosophical discourse that make his victims feel privileged to be destroyed by someone so refined. This is where Hannibal becomes truly dangerous as a cultural symbol. He takes everything we've been taught to respect about human achievement and reveals its potential for ultimate corruption. Every museum we visit, every opera we attend, every philosophical discussion we engage in carries within it the seed of Hannibal's worldview, that culture and intelligence create hierarchies, and hierarchies create permission to treat those below us as less than human. Look at how Hannibal interacts with different characters throughout the stories. With those he considers intellectually inferior, he shows casual contempt masked as polite interest. With those who challenge him intellectually, he shows a predator's focused attention. But with those he deems worthy of his respect, like Clarice, he offers a terrifying form of mentorship that blurs the line between education and corruption. The most disturbing aspect of Hannibal's character isn't his cannibalism. It's his role as teacher. He consistently positions himself as someone who can enlighten others, who can show them truths about human nature that conventional morality obscures. And he's often right. His psychological insights are frequently accurate, his cultural observations often profound, his ability to see through human self-deception genuinely impressive. This creates a moral vertigo that few fictional characters can match. How do we reconcile admiring his insights while condemning his actions? How do we separate the wisdom from the monster who speaks it? The answer is that we can't, and that's precisely the point. Hannibal forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that intelligence, culture, and even wisdom can coexist with ultimate evil. Throughout literary and cinematic history, we've seen various iterations of the sophisticated villain, but none match Hannibal's particular brand of cultural weaponization. Unlike Moriarty, who uses intelligence for criminal gain, or Voldemort, who seeks power through magical force, Hannibal uses culture itself as both weapon and justification. He doesn't just break social rules, he transcends them through superior aesthetic judgment. Consider his dinner parties, both literal and metaphorical. When Hannibal prepares human flesh, he doesn't just cook it. He creates culinary masterpieces that would impress the world's finest chefs. When he kills, he doesn't just murder. He stages artistic tableaus that force viewers to confront the aesthetic dimension of violence. When he manipulates, he doesn't just lie. He reveals psychological truths that his victims never wanted to acknowledge. This pattern reveals something profound about how our society actually functions. We tell ourselves that education civilizes, that culture refines, that intelligence elevates. But Hannibal demonstrates how these same forces can be used to justify the most uncivilized behaviors. He shows us that the distance between a wine connoisseur and a cannibal might be smaller than we'd like to admit. The relationship between intellectual sophistication and moral blindness isn't unique to fiction. History provides countless examples of highly educated individuals who used their cultural refinement to justify horrific acts. The Nazi leadership included doctors, philosophers, and artists who found ways to reconcile their cultural sophistication with genocide. Colonial administrators combined classical education with systematic brutality. Corporate executives merge MBA credentials with environmental destruction. Hannibal represents the logical extreme of this pattern, complete moral dissociation achieved through cultural superiority. He doesn't struggle with conscience because he's transcended the need for conventional morality through sheer intellectual and aesthetic refinement. In his worldview, ordinary moral rules apply only to ordinary people. Exceptional individuals, those with superior taste and intelligence, operate by different standards. This is the most seductive and dangerous aspect of his character. He offers a vision of life unconstrained by the moral limitations that bind ordinary people. He suggests that sufficient sophistication can justify anything, that aesthetic achievement can excuse any cruelty, that intellectual superiority creates permission to treat others as objects for consumption. And here's where we must confront our own complicity. Every time we watch Hannibal and find ourselves impressed by his wit, every time we quote his insights, every time we admire his cultural knowledge, we're participating in the very moral dissociation he represents. We're allowing ourselves to be seduced by the idea that intelligence and culture can excuse or transcend conventional morality. The relationship between Hannibal and Clarice Starling represents the ultimate expression of this seductive corruption. Clarice, representing conventional moral agency, finds herself repeatedly drawn into Hannibal's orbit not despite his monstrosity, but because of the intellectual stimulation he provides. He offers her insights into human nature, into her own psychology, into the cases she's trying to solve, that she cannot obtain through normal channels. But every insight comes with a cost. Every revelation about human nature is delivered through the perspective of someone who has rejected human empathy. Every psychological truth is filtered through the worldview of someone who sees other people as potential meals. Clarice must constantly navigate between benefiting from his knowledge and being corrupted by his perspective. This dynamic mirrors our own relationship with Hannibal as audience members. We want the insights he provides about human nature, about psychology, about the hidden motivations that drive behavior. But we must constantly resist the worldview that makes those insights possible. We must somehow separate the knowledge from the knower, the wisdom from the monster who speaks it. The genius of the character lies in making this separation impossible. Hannibal's insights flow directly from his moral dissociation. His ability to read people comes from his willingness to see them as objects rather than subjects. His psychological accuracy stems from his complete lack of empathy. His cultural sophistication serves his predatory nature rather than contradicting it. Consider the infamous dinner scene from the television series, where Hannibal serves human flesh to unsuspecting dinner guests while discussing art, literature, and philosophy. This scene encapsulates everything terrifying about the character. He's not just committing cannibalism. He's transforming it into a social ritual that his guests find delightful. He's not just deceiving them. He's creating an aesthetic experience that they'll remember fondly even after learning the truth. This is cultural sophistication weaponized against basic human dignity. Every element of refinement, from the perfectly prepared food to the elegant table settings to the stimulating conversation, serves to normalize and disguise an act of ultimate barbarism. The guests don't just eat human flesh, they enjoy it. They don't just participate in cannibalism, they celebrate it as haute cuisine. The scene works as horror precisely because it reveals how easily cultural sophistication can mask moral monstrosity. It shows us that the distance between civilization and barbarism isn't nearly as vast as we like to believe. It demonstrates that all the markers of cultural achievement we value, education, aesthetic refinement, intellectual discourse, can be corrupted to serve the most primitive and destructive human impulses. But here's the truly disturbing question the scene raises. What if the guests discovered the truth but continued eating anyway? What if the combination of exquisite preparation, elegant presentation, and sophisticated discourse was enough to override their moral objections? What if cultural sophistication could actually transform their perception of cannibalism from abhorrent to acceptable? This isn't just a thought experiment. It's a reflection of how cultural authority actually functions in our society. We consistently allow aesthetic presentation and intellectual sophistication to influence our moral judgments. We're more likely to accept questionable behavior from someone who presents it eloquently than from someone who expresses it crudely. We're more willing to overlook ethical problems when they're wrapped in cultural refinement. Hannibal understands this psychological vulnerability and exploits it ruthlessly. He doesn't just commit atrocities, he frames them as expressions of superior aesthetic judgment. He doesn't just manipulate people, he presents his manipulation as a form of sophisticated psychological education. He doesn't just kill and eat people. He transforms these acts into expressions of cultural superiority that separate him from the crude brutality of ordinary criminals. This transformation of brutality into art, of predation into sophistication, of cannibalism into cuisine, represents something far more threatening than simple murder. It represents the complete corruption of everything we use to distinguish civilization from barbarism. It shows us that cultural achievement, rather than protecting us from our worst impulses, can actually be co-opted to serve them. The television series pushed this concept to its logical extreme by showing Hannibal integrated into Baltimore's cultural elite. He's not hiding from civilization. He's actively participating in it, shaping it, using it to enable his predatory behavior. He attends the opera, hosts dinner parties, contributes to philosophical discussions, maintains friendships with other cultural sophisticates. All while systematically hunting, killing, and consuming human beings. This integration reveals something profound about the nature of civilized society itself. Hannibal doesn't succeed despite being surrounded by educated, cultured, sophisticated people. He succeeds because these very qualities create the perfect camouflage for his activities. Cultural sophistication becomes a form of social capital that allows him to move freely among potential victims who mistake his refinement for moral character. The other characters in Hannibal's orbit consistently make this mistake. They assume that someone so knowledgeable about art, so refined in his tastes, so intellectually stimulating in conversation, must possess some fundamental goodness. They cannot conceive that these admirable qualities might actually serve predatory purposes, that cultural sophistication might mask rather than indicate moral development. This blind spot reflects a broader cultural delusion about the relationship between intelligence and virtue, between education and ethics, between aesthetic refinement and moral character. We want to believe that these things go together, that becoming more cultured makes us better people, that intelligence naturally leads to moral insight. Hannibal reveals this belief is not just wrong but dangerous. The character forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own moral assumptions. If someone demonstrates sophisticated knowledge of art, literature, music, and philosophy, do we automatically attribute other positive qualities to them? If someone can discuss complex psychological concepts with apparent insight, do we assume they possess empathy and compassion? If someone displays refined taste in food, wine, and culture, do we infer that they also have refined moral sensibilities? Hannibal suggests that these assumptions are not just incorrect but actively harmful. They create exactly the kind of moral blindness that allows sophisticated predators to operate with impunity. They prevent us from recognizing that cultural achievement and moral development are separate phenomena that may actually conflict with each other in significant ways. The most chilling aspect of Hannibal's character is how he uses genuine insights about human nature to facilitate his predatory behavior. His psychological observations are often accurate, his cultural knowledge authentic, his aesthetic judgments frequently sound. This isn't a case of false sophistication masking brutality, it's genuine sophistication serving brutality. This combination creates a unique form of horror. We cannot dismiss Hannibal as simply ignorant or culturally deficient. We cannot comfort ourselves by believing that education and culture would cure his pathology. Instead, we must confront the possibility that his pathology is actually enhanced by his education and culture, that his sophistication serves his monstrosity rather than conflicting with it. The implications of this realization extend far beyond fiction. If cultural sophistication can serve rather than constrain our worst impulses, then we need to fundamentally reconsider how we think about education, intelligence, and moral development. We need to acknowledge that creating more cultured, educated, intellectually sophisticated people doesn't automatically create better people. This doesn't mean that culture and education are bad or dangerous in themselves. It means that they're morally neutral tools that can serve either constructive or destructive purposes depending on the character of the person wielding them. A scalpel can save lives or take them. Knowledge can liberate or enslave. Cultural sophistication can refine or corrupt. Hannibal represents what happens when these powerful tools fall into the hands of someone who has rejected the moral framework that should guide their use. He shows us that all human achievements, no matter how impressive or admirable, can be perverted to serve inhuman purposes. He demonstrates that the highest expressions of culture can coexist with the lowest expressions of human behavior. The final revelation of Hannibal Lecter isn't about cannibalism or murder or any of his specific crimes. It's about the capacity for sophisticated evil that exists within human nature itself. It's about our ability to use our greatest achievements to justify our worst behaviors. It's about the seductive power of moral dissociation disguised as intellectual superiority. Every time we find ourselves admiring Hannibal's wit, appreciating his insights, or being impressed by his cultural knowledge, we're experiencing a small taste of the moral dissociation he embodies. We're allowing aesthetic and intellectual appreciation to override moral judgment. We're participating, however briefly, in the same process that allows him to transform murder into art and cannibalism into cuisine. This participation should disturb us, but not because it makes us monsters. It should disturb us because it reveals our vulnerability to the same sophisticated corruption that Hannibal represents. It shows us how easily we can be seduced by intelligence, charm, and cultural sophistication even when these qualities serve fundamentally destructive purposes. The enduring fascination with Hannibal Lecter reflects something profound about modern civilization's moral blind spots. We've created a culture that worships intelligence, celebrates sophistication, and rewards cultural achievement without adequately considering how these admirable qualities might be corrupted or weaponized. We've forgotten that moral character and intellectual achievement are separate phenomena that don't automatically reinforce each other. Hannibal serves as a warning about where this cultural blind spot might lead us. He shows us what happens when we allow aesthetic judgment to override moral judgment, when we permit intellectual sophistication to excuse ethical failures, when we mistake cultural refinement for moral development. He represents the logical endpoint of valuing intelligence and culture without simultaneously insisting on conscience and compassion. The gentleman monster isn't just a fictional creation designed to entertain us. He's a mirror held up to our own cultural values, reflecting back the potential darkness hidden within our greatest achievements. He's a reminder that civilization is always fragile, always vulnerable to corruption from within, always dependent on moral choices that no amount of intelligence or culture can make for us. In the end, Hannibal Lecter terrifies us not because he's alien or incomprehensible, but because he's too recognizable. He embodies impulses we all possess, expressed through achievements we all admire, justified by reasoning we all recognize. He shows us what we might become if we abandoned conscience while retaining intelligence, if we rejected empathy while maintaining sophistication, if we chose predation while preserving culture. The true horror of Hannibal Lecter lies not in what he does to his victims, but in what he reveals about ourselves. Every time we watch him, we risk becoming a little more like him. Every insight we gain comes at the cost of moral sensitivity we lose. Every moment of intellectual stimulation he provides is balanced by ethical numbing he induces. This is why Hannibal Lecter remains such a powerful and disturbing cultural figure. He doesn't just represent evil. He represents sophisticated evil that wears the mask of everything we've been taught to admire. He doesn't just threaten our safety. He threatens our moral compass. He doesn't just consume human flesh, he consumes human conscience, one elegant bite at a time. The gentleman monster lives not just in fiction, but in the darker corners of human potential. He reminds us that culture without conscience is not civilization but its sophisticated opposite. He warns us that intelligence without empathy is not wisdom but its elegant corruption. He shows us that refinement without restraint is not achievement but its beautiful perversion. Understanding Hannibal Lecter means understanding ourselves, our vulnerabilities, our capacity for both great achievement and great evil. It means recognizing that the same qualities that make us human can also make us inhuman if we allow them to develop without proper moral guidance. It means acknowledging that becoming more cultured, more educated, more intellectually sophisticated doesn't automatically make us better people unless we simultaneously become more consciously committed to treating others with dignity and respect. The gentleman monster isn't just coming for dinner. He's already here, reflected in every moment we prioritize intelligence over empathy, sophistication over compassion, cultural achievement over moral character. He lives in every institution that rewards intellectual prowess while ignoring ethical development, in every conversation that celebrates clever cruelty, in every decision that chooses aesthetic beauty over human dignity. Hannibal Lecter endures as a cultural icon because he embodies our deepest fears about what we might become and our darkest desires about what we might be freed to do. He represents the ultimate corruption of human potential, the transformation of our greatest gifts into our most dangerous weapons. He is the gentleman we fear becoming and the monster we secretly admire. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying revelation of all.